slammed against the house. The porch light flickered, then nearly went out. The wind howled like it wanted inside. Maribel Cross stood in the dark hallway, robe pulled tight, listening to the heater choke. Upstairs, 2 children slept beneath piled blankets, unaware their mother was counting seconds. The knock came. Once. Then again. On the porch stood 9 men, still as statues. Snow crusted their leather. Helmets hung from gloved hands, patches clear even through the storm. Hell's angels. Since her husband died 3 winters earlier, Maribel had learned one rule: never open the door at night. The neighborhood called it smart. Fear called it survival. The knock came again, slow, controlled. Maribel cracked the door. The man in front raised his hands into the light, older, calm, eyes sharp. "Ma'am," he said, "we're not here to cause trouble." Behind him, one biker swayed, just slightly. His teeth chattered. His hands shook. Maribel froze. No one else noticed, but she did. Her brother used to shake like that before collapsing in the cold. She stepped closer, heart racing, and said one thing: "He's hypothermic." The leader's face changed, because she was right. 9 bikers, 1 freezing night, and a door that should have stayed shut. This is Black Stories, where the pain of prejudice is told, and justice always finds its voice. If you believe mercy should never be punished, tap like and subscribe. Because in the next minutes, you'll watch a black single mom open her door during a blizzard to save 9 strangers, then watch an entire town try to break her for it, and fail, as quiet loyalty, legal truth, and unshakable dignity turn fear back on the people who weaponized it. Maribel Cross didn't invite the 9 men in because she was fearless. She did it because fear had never been a decision-maker in her life. Once the door closed, the wind howled louder outside, angry at being shut out. The bikers stood just inside the entryway, boots dripping slush onto the mat. No one moved farther than she'd allowed. They watched her carefully now, as if trying to understand the rules of a house that wasn't afraid of them, but wasn't impressed either. "Shoes off," Maribel said, nodding at the puddle forming. "I don't need broken tiles tonight." A couple of them blinked. Then boots came off. Quietly. Respectfully. Maribel turned and walked toward the kitchen without waiting to see if they followed. She moved like someone who knew exactly how much time cold gave a body before it started taking things back. Maribel was 36, a black, single mother, widowed 3 winters earlier when black ice didn't care about careful driving or good intentions. Since then, she worked nights as a snow route dispatcher for the county, coordinating plows, tow trucks, emergency reroutes, stranded motorists. She didn't drive the trucks. She moved the pieces. She knew weather the way surgeons knew anatomy. Wind chill, whiteout thresholds, hypothermia windows, when help was coming, and when it wasn't. She knew the look of men who had been cold too long. "Sit," she said, pointing to the dining table, hands near the heater, not on it. One of the younger bikers was shivering so hard his teeth clicked. Maribel didn't comment. She turned on the kettle, pulled out canned soup, lined bowls like muscle memory. The tall one, the one who had knocked, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we don't want to—" She cut him off without looking up. "You want to live. That's all anyone ever wants in weather like this." Silence settled. Not awkward, observant. Maribel set bowls down. Steam rose. She slid a basket of bread across the table. "No rushing," she said. "Cold shock gets people killed faster than pride." They ate, slowly, no jokes, no bravado. While they warmed, Maribel checked her phone. Snow routes blinking red, Outages stacking. A plow stalled 3 miles east. She fired off instructions with one hand while refilling hot water with the other. Upstairs, a muffled cough. Her youngest. Maribel glanced at the ceiling, then back at the men. "You stay right here," she said evenly. "Nobody wanders. Nobody touches what isn't theirs. We understand each other?" The tall man nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." She believed him, because Maribel had been raised by a grandmother who didn't preach kindness, but standards. "Storms don't ask who deserves help," her grandmother used to say while ladling soup for strangers after hurricanes. "They only ask who survives." Maribel didn't ask names, didn't ask where they were headed, didn't ask why 9 Hell's Angels were riding in a blizzard at midnight. She didn't need the story. She handed out phone chargers, a towel for shaking hands, a blanket to the one still shivering. No lectures, no gratitude demanded. She helped them because the storm didn't care who they were, and neither did she. What she didn't know, what none of them knew yet, was that this simple decision, made in under 10 seconds at her front door, was about to turn her quiet house into something else entirely. Not a shelter. A line. By dawn, the storm had loosened its grip, but it hadn't let go. Snow still fell in lazy sheets as first light crept over Maribel Cross's street. The kind of morning that made everything look quieter than it was. 9 motorcycles stood in a clean, unforgiving line outside her house. Black frames dusted white, chrome dulled by ice, club patches half buried under snow like warning signs no one had asked for. Maribel saw them from the kitchen window as she poured cereal for her kids. Her son froze mid-bite. "Mom, why are there so many bikes outside?" "Eat," she said gently. "Bus'll be late." She already knew what those bikes meant. Across the street, a curtain shifted, then another. A phone lifted. Someone whispered something behind a door they didn't open. By 6:42 a.m., the first post hit the town Facebook group. "Why are Hell's Angels parked outside a single mom's house on Maple?" By 6:45. "Is she hiding criminals?" By 6:48. "Someone call CPS. Kids don't belong around that." Maribel's phone buzzed on the counter. Then again. Then wouldn't stop. She didn't look at it. She walked the kids to the door, zipped coats, adjusted scarves. Her daughter hugged her tighter than usual. "Are you in trouble?" she asked quietly. Maribel knelt, met her eyes. "No. People just don't like what they don't understand." Outside, engines rumbled low as the bikers prepared to leave. No revving, no theatrics, just quiet, mechanical precision. That didn't matter. What mattered was the image. 9 bikes. 1 black woman. A town that had already decided what that meant. As the last bike rolled away, a patrol car cruised past. Slow. Deliberate. The officer didn't stop. He didn't wave. He just looked. At 7:10, Maribel's kids' school called, not with concern, with distance. "Ms. Cross, we just wanted to check in," the secretary said, voice thin. "There were some concerns raised online." "Concerns about what?" Maribel asked. A pause. "Well, associations." Maribel smiled without warmth. "My kids were home, safe, and asleep. That's the association." Another pause. "We'll note that." At 8:03, her landlord emailed, "We'll be conducting a routine lease review given recent activity near the property." Routine, after 3 years without a single late payment. By 9:15, a local blog ran a headline, "Who is Maribel Cross really protecting?" They used a photo pulled from someone's porch camera. Maribel in slippers, holding a thermos, a biker in the background blurred just enough to feel sinister. Comments stacked fast. She knew what she was doing. These people always play victim. If it was a white mom, no one would care. Exactly. That's the problem. Maribel sat at her kitchen table, phone face down, hands wrapped around cold coffee. She'd coordinated rescues in whiteouts, redirected plows to save strangers, talked panicked drivers through freezing nights. None of that mattered now. Because this storm wasn't about weather. It was about permission. Who the town allowed to be kind, who they allowed to help, who they trusted to define danger. And the truth settled in, sharp and undeniable. The risk had never been the 9 men who knocked on her door in a blizzard. The risk was everyone who watched her open it. The bikers left just after sunrise. No engines revved for attention, no middle fingers to the neighbors, no speeches, no warnings. 9 men zipped jackets, nodded once to Maribel, and rode out like they had never been there at all. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't even the beginning. By 10:12 a.m., there was a knock at her door. Firm. Official. Maribel opened it to find a woman with a clipboard and a man standing half a step behind her, hands folded like this was routine. "Ms. Cross?" the woman asked. "Yes." "I'm with Child Protective Services. We received an anonymous report requesting a welfare check." Maribel didn't gasp, didn't argue, didn't slam the door. She stepped aside calmly. "Come in." The woman scanned the living room. Clean, warm, toys neatly stacked, a pot of soup still on the stove. "Who else was in the home last night?" the woman asked. "Just my children," Maribel replied. The man behind her cleared his throat. "We were told there were multiple adult males staying here." Maribel met his eyes. "They knocked. They needed warmth. They left." The CPS worker scribbled something. Neutral, non-committal. Upstairs, Maribel's daughter peeked from the railing. "Mom?" "I'm right here," Maribel said gently. "Go finish your homework." The visit ended without findings, but the message landed. At 12:47 p.m., her supervisor called. "Maribel, HR has some questions," he said carefully. "Police reached out asking about your role. Connections." "Connections to what?" she asked. Another pause. "They just wanted to know if you coordinate independently. Off protocol." "I save lives," Maribel said. "That's my protocol." "We're putting you on temporary review," he replied, "just until things calm down." At 2:05, a bright orange notice appeared on her door. Code enforcement. Inspection required. Violation. Exterior obstruction. She stared at it. The bikes were gone. At 3:30, her landlord called. "Hey, Maribel," he said, voice suddenly formal. "Given recent activity, we're reassessing risk exposure." "Risk?" she repeated. "Perception," he corrected. "I'm increasing rent next quarter. Insurance stuff." At 5:10, her son came home quieter than usual. "What happened?" she asked. He shrugged. "Teacher moved my seat. Said I was distracting." Her daughter followed, eyes wet. "They said I scare people," she whispered. Maribel's chest tightened, not with fear, but with clarity. This wasn't coincidence. This was choreography. One call triggered another. One whisper opened a door. One act of mercy lit a signal flare. That night, Maribel sat alone at the kitchen table, paperwork spread out like evidence in a case she never volunteered to be part of. CPS card, HR email, code violation, lease addendum. all because she didn't ask who deserved help. She laughed once, quiet, disbelieving. Storms don't ask, her grandmother's voice echoed in her head, but people do. Maribel folded the notices neatly, because now she understood something the blizzard hadn't taught her. Kindness doesn't just warm people, it exposes you. And in a town that mistakes compassion for weakness, visibility isn't neutral, it's a target. 3 days passed, no engines, no leather, no shadows lingering at the end of her street. Maribel almost convinced herself it was over. Then, just after dusk on the 4th day, there was another knock. Not loud, not aggressive, just deliberate. She looked through the peephole. One man stood on her porch. No colors, no helmet, no swagger. Just a heavy coat dusted with old snow, and a face that looked permanently carved by weather and consequence. She opened the door halfway. "Yes?" "Ma'am," he said, voice low, respectful. "Sorry to bother you." She waited. He didn't step forward. Didn't scan the house. Didn't look past her shoulder. He held eye contact like it mattered. "I'm the one who knocked the other night," he said. "Name's Cole." She nodded once. "Okay." Then he asked the question. Plain, careful, like he already knew the answer and just needed permission to hear it. "Anyone bothering you since?" Maribel's first instinct was honesty. Her second was protection. She thought of her kids upstairs, of labels, of consequences. So she lied. "No," she said evenly. "Everything's fine." Cole studied her face, not like a threat assessment, but like a man trained to hear what wasn't said. He nodded anyway. "Good," he replied. "That's good." He reached into his coat, pulled out nothing, put his hands back. No gift, no card, no phone number. "We don't forget kindness," he said. "That's all." Then he stepped back. "No one will knock again," he added, "unless you want them to." And he left. That was it. No promises spoken aloud. But that night, something shifted. The next morning, Maribel checked her voicemail. A CPS supervisor had left a message at 6:12 a.m. "Ms. Cross, following further review, your file has been officially closed. No further action required. Apologies for the inconvenience." At 9:03 a.m., a police cruiser stopped outside her house. Her stomach clenched, but the officer didn't step out aggressive. He adjusted his hat. "Ma'am," he said, clearing his throat. "We wanted to clarify that last week's drive-by was not an investigation. There was a miscommunication." She raised an eyebrow. He avoided it. "At any rate, you're not under observation." Under observation. At 11:47, her landlord emailed. Subject line: Update. Lease status. After reviewing circumstances, the proposed rent adjustment will not be moving forward. Thank you for being a valued tenant. At 2:20, her supervisor called again. "Hey, Maribel," he said, suddenly casual. "HR closed the review. Turns out nothing was out of bounds. You're back on full rotation tonight." She hung up slowly. By evening, her kids came home different. Her son grinned. Teacher apologized. For what? Said there was a misunderstanding. Her daughter dropped her backpack and said, "The lady at the front desk smiled today." Maribel sat at the kitchen table long after they went upstairs. No threats had been made, no fists thrown, no laws broken. Yet everything that had pressed down on her, quietly, bureaucratically, relentlessly, had lifted, like a weight removed without announcement. She understood then. They weren't guarding her house. They weren't intimidating anyone. They weren't protecting her body. They were doing something far more precise. They were reminding a system that pressure works both ways. That visibility could be countered. That a woman didn't need to be erased just because she refused to be cruel. Maribel exhaled. For the first time since the storm, she felt warm again. Not because she was powerful, but because she wasn't alone. And because somewhere out there, 9 men who asked for nothing had quietly decided, this woman will not be crushed for choosing mercy. They didn't knock this time. The notice was taped to her door at 7:18 a.m. Emergency eviction hearing. Same day. Maribel read it twice, then a third time. Her hands stayed steady, but only because she'd learned years ago that panic wastes oxygen. The document claimed code violations, unauthorized occupants, public safety concerns. None of it was true. She called the city clerk. "Ma'am," the woman said briskly, "the hearing's already scheduled." "How?" Maribel asked. "There's supposed to be a review period." A pause. Then, "This one was expedited." "By who?" Another pause. Longer. "I don't have that information." By noon, the courthouse steps were full. Neighbors she'd nodded to for years stood in small clusters, whispering. Phones were out, not for support, for spectacle. Inside, the courtroom felt tight, airless. Maribel sat alone at the front table. No lawyer, no theatrics. Just a folder with dates, times, and printed emails she barely understood. She felt it then, the town's expectation, that she'd apologize, that she'd explain herself into exhaustion, that she'd fold. The bailiff called the case. Cross versus City of Pine Hollow. Murmurs rippled. The city attorney stood first, a young man with polished shoes and a rehearsed concern. "Your Honor," he began, "this is a matter of public safety. Ms. Cross knowingly harbored—" "Harbored," Maribel repeated softly. He ignored her. "Individuals associated with criminal organizations. As a result, the city has determined—" The door at the back of the courtroom opened. No noise, no drama. 9 men entered. They didn't wear colors, didn't scan the room, didn't posture. They took the back bench, 1 row, all 9, hands folded, eyes forward. The room shifted. Not fear, awareness. The city attorney faltered for half a beat, then pushed on. "As I was saying, this hearing is about community standards." "Objection," a calm voice said. A woman stood from the aisle seat near the bikers. Mid-40s, gray suit, no smile. "On what grounds?" the judge asked, already frowning. "On the grounds that this hearing was fast-tracked using falsified documents," she replied, "and that the defendant is being targeted through coordinated municipal pressure." The judge blinked. "And you are?" "Counsel," she said, "for the intervening parties." She laid a stack of files on the clerk's desk. Exhibit A. Emails between code enforcement and the landlord, dated after the alleged violations. Gasps. Exhibit B. Internal city messages referring to Ms. Cross as a problem resident following social media backlash. A murmur swept the room. Exhibit C. A pattern analysis showing similar expedited actions taken exclusively against residents of color who received public scrutiny. The city attorney's face drained. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." "So is fraud," the attorney said evenly. She turned, just slightly, toward Maribel. "Ms. Cross was subjected to an anonymous welfare check, a retaliatory lease review, and now an unlawful eviction attempt, all within 10 days. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Cross," he asked, "did you receive notice of any violations prior to today?" "No, sir," Maribel answered. I asked. There were none. The judge looked back at the city attorney. Explain that? Silence. From the back row, one of the bikers shifted, just enough to be seen. No glare, no threat, just presence. The judge straightened. This hearing is stayed, he said sharply, effective immediately. The room froze. I am ordering a full review of the city's actions, he continued, including potential civil rights violations. He looked directly at the city attorney. And I suggest you retain counsel. Whispers erupted. The bailiff banged the gavel. Order! Maribel exhaled. Slow, controlled. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't begged, hadn't been saved. The town had overreached, and for the first time, it had been caught. On the record. As the room emptied, the 9 men stood. They didn't look at the crowd. Didn't wait for thanks. One of them paused beside Maribel's table and said quietly, "You're clear." Then they walked out. Together. And the silence they left behind wasn't fear. It was accountability. It didn't explode. It unraveled. That was the part no one expected. By the next morning, the town's Facebook groups went quiet. Not because people felt remorse, but because lawyers had entered the chat. A single line appeared on the city website before noon. The Department of Justice has opened a preliminary civil rights inquiry into recent municipal actions. No explanations, no spin, just gravity. Inside Town Hall, doors closed that never had before. The mayor canceled his lunch appearance. The city manager took personal leave. The clerk who'd fast-tracked the eviction stopped answering calls. By afternoon, subpoenas arrived. Not dramatic ones, clinical ones, requests for emails, text logs, internal memos, and those documents did what outrage never could. They told the truth in timestamps. An email from code enforcement surfaced first, sent 2 hours after the bikes were photographed outside Maribel's house. Public perception issue. We should move fast before this becomes precedent. Another followed, from the Housing Authority. Tenant is high-risk PR, expedite removal. Then one from a police lieutenant. We need to discourage this type of behavior before it spreads. No mention of crime, no mention of danger, just discouragement. The officer who'd initiated the welfare check was placed on administrative leave by day's end. By day 2, it was no longer administrative. He'd forwarded screenshots from a private group chat. One message was highlighted in yellow by the investigators. If she wanted protection, she shouldn't have invited them. The Housing Authority audit followed quickly. They found discrepancies, files pulled without cause, complaints fast-tracked without review. 3 other residents, same zip code, same demographic, flagged after viral posts. A pattern. Then the whistleblower came forward. A junior clerk, 26, new hire. She didn't go to the press. She went to federal counsel. Her statement was brief and devastating. I was told to alter the eviction timeline. When I asked why, my supervisor said, "This one's different. We're making an example." An example of what? Kindness? Visibility? Refusal to shrink? The inquiry expanded. By the end of the week, it wasn't just about Maribel Cross. It was about Pine Hollow. School district emails were pulled, notes about her children labeled potential disruptions. A guidance counselor admitted, on record, that she'd been advised to monitor them. For what? No answer. The landlord's phone records were subpoenaed next. He'd raised the rent after a single call from city offices. He tried to claim coincidence. The timestamps disagreed. And through it all, Maribel said very little. She went to work, sent her kids to school, made dinner. When a reporter finally caught her outside the courthouse and asked, "Did you expect this level of response?" She paused, then said calmly, "I expected the truth to hold." That was it. No speeches, no victory lap. Behind the scenes, the legal backstop did its work. The biker's attorney, still unnamed in the press, filed a brief that reframed everything. Not as protection, not as intimidation, but as presence in a vacuum of accountability. The DOJ agreed. In their interim report, one sentence landed like a verdict. Ms. Cross did not gain power through influence. The system revealed its bias when it attempted to remove her. The town realized, too late, that they hadn't picked a fight. They'd exposed themselves. Maribel never asked to be shielded. She never demanded allies. She never raised her voice. But when pressure came down on her, the law stood up. And the silence that followed wasn't fear anymore. It was reckoning. Because sometimes power doesn't arrive as force. It arrives as a file number. Justice didn't arrive with sirens. It arrived with paperwork finalized. On a Tuesday morning, Maribel Cross received an email from a federal housing mediator. Subject line: Resolution confirmed. No apology. No poetry. Just outcomes. Her eviction case was formally dismissed with prejudice, meaning it could never be refiled. The falsified documents were entered into the record as evidence of discriminatory retaliation. The city was ordered to cover her legal fees and issue a compliance report every quarter for the next 3 years. By noon, her landlord called. His voice sounded smaller than usual. "I just wanted to say, the lease is being renewed. Same rate, longer term. I'll put it in writing." Maribel listened, then replied evenly, "Please do." She didn't thank him. At work, her supervisor pulled her aside near the dispatch board. "I want you to know, your position is protected. HR flagged it, permanently." Maribel nodded. "I know." That afternoon, the school counselor called. Different tone. "Careful now. We're assigning a new advisor for your children, and, we've removed some notes from their files." Maribel's jaw tightened. "Good," she said. "They shouldn't have been there." The counselor cleared her throat. "We agree." That night, Maribel cooked dinner slowly. Rice, chicken, greens. Her kids talked about homework, about snow days, about nothing that felt heavy. And that was the point. Later there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find the same man who'd come days earlier. Quiet, steady, respectful. No cut visible this time, no crowd. He didn't step inside, didn't ask to. He just nodded once. "It's done," he said. She studied him. "I didn't ask for this." He smiled faintly. "We know." He hesitated, then added, "You opened a door. We closed ranks." That was it. No contract, no expectation, no ownership. He turned to leave. "Wait," Maribel said. He paused. She held his gaze. "I don't belong to anyone." He met her eyes evenly. Exactly. And then he was gone. The next morning the bikes were gone too. No parade, no warning. Just absence, but the town felt different. Quieter, not peaceful. Aware. People nodded now. Some looked away. Some smiled too wide. Some said nothing at all. Maribel didn't adjust her stride for any of them. Because protection, she learned, didn't always mean someone standing in front of you. Sometimes it meant making sure no one could push you out. They didn't give her power. They didn't claim her story. They simply ensured one thing: that Maribel Cross and her children could live, work, and exist without being erased. And in a town that tried to make her disappear, that was everything. Snow fell again the following week. Not a blizzard. just enough to soften the edges of the town. Maribel Cross stood at her kitchen window, coffee cooling in her hands, watching her kids walk to the bus stop. They laughed, shoved each other playfully, safe, unwatched. No cruisers idled down the block, no notices taped to her door, no whispers chasing her name. Just normal. She turned back to the sink, rinsed her mug, and started her shift. Dispatch screens lighting up, radios crackling with calm instructions. The same work she had always done. The same woman she had always been. Nothing about her life looked extraordinary now. And that was the victory. Because sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is help when fear tells you not to. And sometimes, protection isn't loud. It doesn't demand thanks. It doesn't ask for loyalty. It just makes injustice impossible to repeat. Maribel didn't save anyone that night in the storm. She simply refused to let humanity freeze. And the world quietly, irrevocably, adjusted itself around that choice. This is Black Stories, where dignity earns loyalty, courage creates community, and kindness outlives intimidation. Here's a quick question for you. What would you have done? Would you have opened the door? Would you have risked the whispers, the phone calls, the threats, just to keep 9 strangers from freezing? Or would you have done what the town expected? Looked the other way, protected yourself, and let the storm decide who lived? Most people say they'd help. Most people lie. Maribel didn't. And because she chose mercy over safety, 9 men chose loyalty over silence. If you believe kindness still deserves protection, like this video. If you've ever been punished for doing the right thing, share your story in the comments. If you think the world needs more people like Maribel Cross, subscribe, because we tell the stories they try to bury. The blizzard didn't care who deserved help. Neither should we.